Hey everybody, so today we're going to be doing a video over literal equations. And so these are the type of equations that basically involve little to no numbers and are made of primarily of variables or letters or symbols. And so that's what makes it a tad bit more difficult than a normal equation, because you're working with a bunch of unknown, and so you got to have a really good understanding of inverse operations to be able to make this stuff work. And so this is what you're going to be working on today. You will be able to solve mathematical and scientific formulas and other literal equations for a specific variable. And so starting with the first one, so this is a very common problem that you will see. So just as a great note, here's your procedures again. Now, as a side note for your future notes, this right here is actually going to be known as standard form, linear standard form. And so this is just a heads up, because you're going to see this come back up in a few more weeks. But overall, let's go ahead and start the problem. And so it says, annotate the variable that you are solving for by underlining. So given the equation 3x minus 2y is equal to negative 16, solve the following equation for y. So it's telling me to solve for y, so I'm going to go ahead and underline all those y's, because I need to know which variable I'm solving for, and so I know that I'm solving for y, so all my inverse operations will be to isolate that particular variable. And so I'm going to go ahead and just give an equation, but there we go. Now let's go ahead and start solving this. I'm going to go ahead and separate my left and right expression. So you got your left, you got your right side. Now, for second step at this point, use inverse operations to isolate the variable term. And so if I know I'm solving for y, that means I need to move everything else other than all the other terms outside of the y to its opposite side. So when we look at the left, we also have a 3x here. So that means that 3x now needs to go. We're going to use its inverse operation, which is minus 3x on both sides. 3x minus 3x gives us a 0 pair. And so again, anything minus itself will give you 0. We drop down to negative 2y. It's equal to negative 16 minus 3x. At this point, we're going to go ahead and check this one off and check this one off. Now we're going to use inverse operations to isolate the variable again. So be mindful that we're solving for the y. Now this says negative 2y, but that means negative 2 times y. So that means its inverse operation would be to divide by negative 2. Divide all this by negative 2. And so at that point, anything divided by itself will always give you 1. And we're left with the y is equal to. Now, some people will tend to do this differently. And if you want to, if you get confused, you could always circle it. And so I like circling what I'm going to divide. And so now I know that I have to divide negative 16 by negative 2, which will give me positive 8. Then I come over here, and now I need to divide negative 3 by negative 2, which gives me positive 3 over 2. Now you have a choice to write it as a decimal, but for the most part in algebra we like to stick with fractions, and so might as well leave it as a fraction. Now, although this is possibly the final answer, we like to rearrange it with our leading with our highest degree in alphabetical order, and so I'm going to use the cumulative property to move this over. And so all I did was just flip them or switch them around, because you could do that. Think about it. 2 plus 3 gives you 5. 3 plus 2 still gives you 5. So no matter what order you put the addition, it'll still be the same. And so there we go. Now from here, just as a side note, because this is going to come back in the future, remember that this now is in slope intercept form. And so since it is in slope intercept form, you know two things. You know your slope, and you also know your y-intercept from here. And so that's going to be helpful when you're going to be solving and graphing these equations. So from here, you could tell that this graph will look something like this. We know that the y-intercept is 8, so it should be somewhere up here. We know that the slope is positive, and so you could suspect that the line will look something like this, but always go back to Desmos to make sure that the graph looks like that. There's going to be some problems where they'll give you this equation, and they'll ask you to basically rearrange it so that you could graph it, and then they'll give you 4 graphs, so it's always important to know what your graph looks like. But to repeat the process, annotate the problem first, underline your variables, which we did. At that point, use inverse operations. Now, typically, it's always you're gonna use basically reverse order of operations. So if you start from here, you notice that the first thing we did was addition or subtraction. And I'm not sure if you can see that. I'm gonna use the highlighter. We use addition and a subtraction. That was the first step right here. Then we went through and we did multiplication and division. We didn't multiply, but we definitely did divide, and there was no exponents, there's no parentheses, so at that point we were done. So it was 2 steps. And so I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the next problem. That's just your exemplar, so that way you know what to refer back to. So if you want to go ahead and hit pause so you can work out this problem on your own, go ahead and hit pause. All right, doing the same thing. I'm going to rewrite my equation so I know what to work with. Now, step 1, underline the variable. Well, first I'm going to go ahead and annotate, see what I got. Given the equation, this is our equation. Solve for y. And so I'm going to go back. I'm going to underline the y. I'm going to go ahead and draw my line to separate the left and the right side. And so again, I want you to think about it. Internalize this a little bit. Reverse order of operations. You're going to want to do addition or subtraction first. And so at this point, I see that the y is what I need by myself. I have another term right here, so I'll go ahead and do its inverse, which will be to subtract 5x from both sides. That forms a 0 pair, so I could drop this down. Now, I failed to mention why we can't subtract this right here. Now ask yourself, are these like terms? Can you subtract 6 minus 5x? Are they like terms? No, this is a constant, and this actually has a variable of x, so they're not the same, so you can't do anything with them, so you just put them together. 6 minus 5x. So this step is done. We're already on step 3. We're almost done. Now we're on the multiplication or division. So go back and look at your problem. This says negative 3 times y. Since it's multiplying, we will need to divide. And we're going to divide everything by negative 3. Negative 3 divided by 3 gives us 1y, because anything divided by itself will give you 1. And then again, if you get confused about what you want to multiply, you can always circle them to know what you're going to multiply. It's not butterfly, so it looks like the butterfly method, but it's not. So all you're going to do is just divide at this point. 6 divided by negative 3 gives you negative 2. Negative 5 divided by negative 3. Well, 3 does not divide into 5 to give you a whole number, so you might as well just leave that as a fraction. Negative divided by negative gives you 5 over 3x. Now you want to reverse it or move the terms over, rearrange them, and now from here you could tell that this is your slope, this is your y-intercept, and using your 8th grade knowledge that you learned last year, if you had a graph, we know our y-intercept is negative, so it's going to be somewhere down here. We look at our slope. Is it positive or negative? It's positive, so that means it's increasing. And so I'm going to draw my line going up, so it's increasing. So that's just a rough sketch of what my line will look like. But again, always go to Desmos to check your work, graph your equation. Okay. All right. And so those are your I do problems. There's an exploration I would like you to do. Now we're down to the actual literal equation. So these pop up every so often, and so it's important to always follow your steps and read the problem carefully. So solve the equation for W. Okay, doesn't sound any different from what we've been doing. So my equation that they gave me is P equals 21 plus 2W. What I'm going to do is underline everywhere where I have a W, 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 W. So, again, doing what we've been doing. And this time I didn't give you your chart, but again, we have PEMDAS, or your order operations. And you want to work backwards this time. Instead of going forwards, you're going to go backwards. So starting off with addition and subtraction. And so looking at the variable that you want to isolate, is there anything that's adding or subtracting? Well, it says 21 plus this, so that means since this is 21, I got to do its inverse to find its zero pair. Minus 21, minus 21. 21 minus 21 gives me 0. P minus 21, can't subtract those because those are not like terms. We got 2W there. At this point, this is done. We're on step 3 now. And so I'm going to go ahead and group these up again. We'll use a different color. And so we have M and D, multiplication and division. 2 times W, 2W. So the inverse would be to divide everything by 2. And so we end up with W is equal to, and depending on what the test looks like, I'm going to go ahead and leave this alone. That could be a possible answer. Now you could go ahead and further simplify it if you want to. Now, and the reason why I probably will stop here is because this can get a little ugly if it does not simplify nicely. So again, using our circling method to show what we're going to divide, we end up with P is divided by 2 minus 21 divided by 2. And so you see, that's kind of ugly looking. It's better to have left it here. Essentially, these two are the same thing. So depending on what your answer choices are, that's where you want to go with. I think the better answer would have been P minus 21 divided by 2 is equal to W as the final solution, final equation. And so, check, check. And the rest are just your practice problems. And so, go ahead and stop the video. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the video. And you guys have a good day.